I'm a widowed rancher, and on that stormy night I saw something I'll never forget. A pregnant young woman fighting against the wind and the freezing rain to try and save a newborn calf stuck in the mud. That scene stopped me dead in my tracks and completely changed the course of my night. But before I go on, I want to hear from you. At the end of the story, drop a comment letting me know what you thought. Give it a rating from 0 to 10, and tell me what city you're watching from. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel to support my work and join me on this journey. The storm hit without warning, like almost everything that changes a life forever. It was near 11 at night when I stepped out in my soaked slicker to check the calving pasture. The mud was already up to my horse's ankles when I spotted a figure kneeling out there in the middle of the field. A woman, pregnant, all alone. Her hands were wrapped around the neck of a newborn calf that was barely breathing. I froze. It wasn't just the bizarre sight of a pregnant woman out in the pasture at that hour. It was something about the way she held that animal. Like saving that calf meant saving herself. When I finally got close, she scrambled back, her eyes wide with panic. "Don't come any closer," she said. Her voice was shaking, but her eyes had the look of someone who had learned the hard way not to trust a soul. Her name was Sarah, and behind those terrified eyes was a story that, had I known it that night, would have broken whatever was still left whole inside of me. My name is Arthur. I'm 54 years old with hands calloused from decades of working the Hollow Creek Ranch, out here in the high plains of Wyoming, in a county where dirt roads connect ranches miles apart, and the sky just seems to go on forever. The locals call me a bit of a recluse because of the quiet way I carry myself. But anyone who really knows me understands that beneath this hardened shell is a man who wears guilt like a daily uniform. Years ago, I tried to step in and break up a situation involving a neighbor and his family. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought showing up would change things. But I only made it worse. The woman I thought I was helping begged me to leave. The kids were terrified of me. And the man, the one I figured was the problem, only got more dangerous after I drove off. I carried that weight for years. Ever since then, I learned to second-guess my own gut instincts. I want to help, but I'm terrified of destroying the very things I'm trying to save. I didn't sleep at all that night. I brought Sarah into the guest room of the main house without asking a single question, got her some hot food and dry blankets, and wrestled with that calf for hours, until the little guy finally stood up and nursed his mother's colostrum. That raw scene of life just stubbornly refusing to quit in the middle of a storm reminded me of something my late wife Eleanor used to say. That life always finds a way to keep going, even when the whole world seems stacked against it. Sarah watched the whole thing with eyes that still hadn't decided if I was safe. The rain didn't let up for 3 days. The drumming on the tin roof was constant, a heavy, almost deafening drone. Sarah stayed in the room mostly, only coming out to grab a bite. She didn't say much. When she did speak, it was just to say thank you. But the way she thanked me, voice low, shoulders hunched, like she was constantly apologizing for just taking up space, told me more than any words ever could. The next morning, she gave me the bare minimum. She said she had to leave, that someone was looking for her, and she absolutely couldn't stay. I just told her that a dirt road with 1.5 feet of mud was no place for a pregnant woman, and she was staying at least until the sky cleared. But on the 3rd day, when I drove out to Bill's feed store to pick up some rock salt, I overheard something I shouldn't have. Clint was asking around about a pregnant woman who had wandered off from the neighboring ranch, telling everyone she was unstable and desperately needed medical care. It was the tone of a man putting out a hunting party, not a worried family member. It was the voice of a predator. Clint was known around the county as a sharp businessman. He flipped land, brokered shady deals, and had a real knack for showing up as the savior right when folks were in a bind. But if you looked close enough, you saw the pattern. He lived his life utterly convinced everyone was trying to cheat him. Any sign of independence from folks around him was treated like treason. Any innocent question was a conspiracy. I drove back to the ranch without buying the salt. I sat out on the porch. I stared at the barbed wire fence separating our 2 properties for a long, long time. Tyler, one of the younger ranch hands, noticed the look on my face and asked if everything was all right. I told him yeah. It was the first time I'd lied in years. That very night, Sarah showed me some paperwork she'd dug up in the abandoned old farmhouse on Clint's land. They were land deeds and transfer contracts. One of them had my wife's signature, Eleanor's signature, but it was dated 2 years before she passed away, right during a time when she was incredibly sick and practically bedridden. Eleanor could barely hold a pen back then. She couldn't even stay awake for more than a few hours at a time. Yet there was her signature, bold and perfect, like she was in the prime of her life. I stared at that ink like I was looking at a ghost. My hand shook just a little. That piece of paper felt heavier than it had any right to be. "Where did you get this?" was all I could manage to choke out. Sarah told me there was more, a lot more. She had found an entire lockbox of files hidden under some loose floorboards at the old place. Deeds, receipts, ledgers, and Clint's name was stamped all over every single one of them. Marcus, my lawyer and an old friend from way back, drove out to the ranch on the 7th day under the excuse of checking on some cattle. I slid the contracts across the table to him. He sat dead quiet for almost 2 solid minutes, the kind of heavy silence that screams louder than yelling. He looked at the papers, looked up at me, and looked right back down. "Arthur, if this is what I think it means Hollow Creek might have a lien on it without you even knowing," he said. "Clint might have used Eleanor's name when she was too far gone to fight back. And if that's true, buddy, you could lose this whole place." The hardwood floor under my boots suddenly felt like quicksand. The real turning point hit when Tyler, completely by accident, let it slip to Clint that the boss had taken in a special guest the week the storm rolled through. He didn't drop a name. He didn't have to. Clint rolled up to the Hollow Creek front gate the very next day with a smile that didn't quite reach his cold eyes and a whole lot of neighborly sweet talk. He rode up on horseback, acting like he was just out stretching the animal's legs, just stopping by to shoot the breeze. He casually asked if I'd seen a woman in a delicate condition wandering around the area. Claimed she was a distant cousin, that her mind was playing tricks on her, and that he was just sick with worry about her and the baby on the way. The way he spoke was smooth, almost like a concerned brother. But his eyes were doing math, calculating every word, every breath, every pause I took. I told him no. I lied, looking dead into his eyes. Clint let his gaze drift over to the guest room window for just a second too long. I saw the curtain twitch. I knew he saw it too. He finally turned his horse around, but before trotting off, he called back, "You ever need anything, Arthur, we look out for each other, right? We're neighbors, after all." Martha, the ranch cook who'd been keeping us fed for 18 years and knew every secret buried in those walls, slipped into Sarah's room the second Clint rode out of sight. "He knows you're in here," she whispered, "and when that man sets his mind on something, he don't ever sleep." Sarah stayed up all night. So did I. Just in separate rooms, each of us carrying the crushing weight that was building up between our walls. Jake, a neighbor's teenage boy who picked up odd jobs around the barn, spotted a guy snapping pictures of the Hollow Creek main house from a pickup truck parked out on the county highway. He scribbled the license plate down on a feed receipt and handed it to me, not really knowing what it meant. I knew exactly what it meant. On the 12th day, Marcus called with the bad news. The documents were absolute forgeries, but they were high-level fakes, good enough to tie us up in court for months, maybe years. Clint had a team of slick lawyers. He had the county clerk's office in his pocket, but mostly he had time, which was the one thing Sarah, looking like she could go into labor any minute, didn't have. I took a walk out into the pasture right around sundown, just me and the herds I'd raised by hand. The plains were finally greening up after all that rain. That rich smell of damp earth and sagebrush was rising up from the dirt. The crickets were tuning up for the night. Everything out there was starting over, getting a fresh start. Except for me. I felt like I was drowning in the dirt while the whole world bloomed. That was right when Thomas, an old buddy who worked as the county courthouse clerk before retiring to raise quarter horses, gave me a ring with something nobody saw coming. Eleanor's forged signature was sitting on 2 other shady land deeds over in the next county. Clint hadn't just pulled this scam on Hollow Creek. It was his whole business model. He'd robbed other grieving families. For the first time in weeks, I felt something burn inside me that wasn't pure panic. I felt a plan coming together. Clint made his one fatal miscalculation on the 16th day. Trying to put the squeeze on me in public, he called for a friendly sit-down, right in the middle of Bill's feed store, with half the town buying supplies, and slapped those forged papers on the counter as proof of some phantom debt my family supposedly owed him. An old handshake deal, he claimed, that never got settled. A debt that would conveniently hand him a massive slice of Hollow Creek. It was a classic bully move that banked entirely on me keeping my mouth shut. But I didn't walk in there alone. I brought Marcus. And Marcus brought crisp copies of all 3 forged deeds, including the ones from the neighboring county. And Thomas walked right in behind him with the official hospital logs proving Eleanor was on a ventilator the exact days she supposedly signed away our land. The silence that fell over Bill's feed store wasn't like Marcus's silence. It was the heavy, dangerous silence of a whole town suddenly realizing they'd been bled dry by a man they used to drink coffee with. Margaret, one of the most well-respected women in the county, who'd lost her mother's heritage farm to Clint in a confusing foreclosure years back, was the very first to stand up from her stool and say out loud exactly what every person in that room was thinking. Clint tried to push his way out the door. Bill calmly reached over and locked the deadbolt. Not to start a riot, just with the quiet, terrifying gravity of a town that had finally decided they were done looking the other way. Sarah went into labor on the 19th day, right in the early hours of a clear, calm morning, with Martha right there holding her hand, while I sat out in the hallway on a wooden chair, turning my Stetson over and over in my hands, waiting like a man waiting for his own second chance at life. When that baby let out its first strong cry and Martha opened the door beaming to say Mama and a healthy baby boy were doing just fine, I buried my face in my hands for a long, clean minute. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Emily, a social worker Marcus had quietly reached out to a few days back, pulled up to the ranch on the 20th day to help get Sarah squared away legally and safely. We all knew it was going to be a long, uphill battle from here. The courts, the fallout, the healing. But at least there was a road to walk down now. On the 21st day, the whole county seemed to just show up in the Hollow Creek driveway for an old-fashioned barn raising. Nobody sent out invites. It just started when Tyler rolled in at the crack of dawn with a post hole digger, asking where I wanted the collapsed old hay shed rebuilt. Then a couple more trucks pulled in. Then a dozen. Laura, the local school teacher who'd been quietly writing down Sarah's whole story these past few weeks to make sure it never got twisted, brought a sapling and planted a beautiful white oak, the toughest tree on the plains, right next to the fresh lumber, dedicating it to all the women who had ever found a safe harbor at Hollow Creek, Eleanor included. I stood there staring at that little sapling, still fragile but putting its roots down deep into that rich, dark mud. A little promise of green fighting its way out of the dirt. Down by the fence, the calf Sarah had pulled from the storm was out grazing, strong, standing tall on all fours, completely oblivious to what that stormy night had almost cost us all. I walked over to the fence, leaned my forearms on the top wire, and just stared out at the horizon, at that massive, endless sky that you couldn't possibly capture in just one word. For the first time in more years than I could count, the silence around me didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like I could finally breathe. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every single day that will brighten up your life. Drop a comment with your thoughts on my story. Give it a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you so much for watching.